Hello and welcome back to the Mississippi Family Homestead. This is our live stream tonight, and want to welcome you back. We're trying to do this every weeknight, and the cat getting in a little way. This is Missile. Say hello to Missile. So, tonight, I think I may have put the wrong thumbnail on here. It says how to hatch chicken eggs. That was actually last night. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that's
So we're going to be talking about homesteading tonight, about how to get started, and maybe some ideas that we could give you to help you. So
right. Sorry, we're running a little late getting things together here, but hope everybody's doing really good tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about some things like for you that are looking at starting a homestead. And, what was the point that we lived in a different house, kind of in some areas you'd say suburban type house. And, we decided that enough of that, we were ready to move back to the country. What do you think made us decide that?
yeah, so we had just a really high house note, and we had all this land. It was actually family land, so we thought, why are we doing that? Why are we living here when we have all this land that we could move to and have a garden and maybe some animals and, grow our own food and do things, to help our health and for ourselves to grow some of our own food and, maybe to have some chickens and that kind of thing. And that was our thought, so we just decided to sell our house and move back to the farmland. And it's actually, we have a pretty good many acres here, 40 something. So we really enjoy it here. So
And our cat is up on the computer, so if we go off, then that's what it is. But yeah, we that was a rather expensive house, and we decided it just wasn't worth it, so we cut back. We downsized to barely what we needed. And at first, when we moved here, we moved on. I'm sorry, we're laughing at the cat. You can't see him, but he's. We lived in what we built was we built a shop. We lived in it for a little while, and then we got this house, and it's still smaller than what we were used to, but it's really all we need. And I think a lot of times we get used to having such a needing. The more you make, you always want to just
get
get a
more and
bigger
more.
house,
Yeah.
and so we decided to to do away with that, but and move out here. So,
Our cat is really entertaining tonight. He's do I need to go get him?
yeah, if you don't mind.
Yes,
He's,
okay. So
he's on the switcher with the cameras, and he's actually going to do something bad, knock us off. So, but he's bad about that. So this proves this is actually live. So, okay. But anyway, we had a shift in our mindset. Before we were kind of into that want to be successful type thing, and now we we're ready to kind of be more connected here to family and the land and nature, and that's what kind of got us into homesteading.
and we've been here for what, like five,
Five
or
years, I
6
think,
years.
5 or 6 years, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. So, and we started off small, and one of the things you have to do when you're homesteading or trying to homestead is have your mindset has to shift, and it really takes some dedication sometimes. And you think you watch all these YouTube videos, about these people doing homesteading, and they really kind of make it look easy, but it's really not. So, if you're trying to start your own homestead, you really need to have that mindset, that you're really going to do this and you're really going to make it work. So,
That's right. You see a lot of these homesteading channels. They do a great job, but you see them years, uh, sometimes 10 years after they've already moved into the homestead and got everything established, and you don't realize that took a long time. You got to do it a
yeah,
little at a time. So
yeah.
you got to make sure you want it, and because homesteading is a lot of work. We've got a garden. We've got a pretty large garden normally, and uh, I'll tell you, it's a lot of work, especially here in Mississippi. Gardening season is when it is so hot outside, and I
Yeah,
mean
you have
upper
to be.
nineties,
Yeah, you
high
have to
humidity.
really want to get out there and work in the garden and have your mindset to grow your own food. But that being said, you don't have to have a whole bunch of land to actually do your own homesteading, especially, if you're just wanting to have a small garden or if you're just wanting to have, some chickens. You don't have to have 30 chickens like I do. You can you
Yeah.
can have
And you
6.
probably be smarter not to have.
That's right.
Here's a picture of our land when we first moved here,
Yeah.
and we did do a lot of work, and did a lot of tree cutting and everything, and we're out in the middle of the country, and I thought I had a video ready to go of our garden, and but it's we already had the garden when we moved up here. I mean, before we moved up here, we were doing a
Right,
little
right.
gardening, and my dad was doing some gardening too. So, we were kind of sharing it, and
Yeah.
but you got to be careful not to bite off more than you can chew. But
It's a
I
lot
would,
of work.
um,
You don't plant more than what you're actually going to need or what you can actually use. If you're going to plant corn, don't plant rows and rows and rows that you're not going to actually use or put up. So we've had a pretty large garden in the past, and we've been able to grow corn and potatoes and what all the peas and tomatoes.
yeah, a lot of tomatoes, peas.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of that.
Squash, that kind of stuff. So we've really, worked hard at our garden, and then it's the chickens. That's my kind of my thing. I grew up with chickens, and I love chickens, and not only to provide eggs, but I just enjoy the chickens themselves. So, that's kind of our story and how we got started. That we just kind of moved up here and we started our garden that was already working on, and I decided to get chickens. And at first, it was only just what 6? Was it 6 or
Yeah,
7
I think
chickens?
it was just a few chickens at
Yeah,
first.
yeah. And they were enough, for us. You don't have to have tons of chickens.
And she really has a lot of chickens just because it's more of a hobby thing, and not because you have to.
Right.
But and also, if you are thinking that homesteading is cheaper than going to the grocery store, it's probably not. You probably could figure out a way to save money, but for us, it's not. But
It
but
might.
it is healthier, and we do have goals. It may not look like it with me, but we are having goals of eating healthier
Yeah.
and better quality food when you get it out of the garden. And but you don't always have to have a big garden. Homesteading can be done. I mean, gardening can be done really with a few buckets. You can start growing tomatoes and stuff there.
Yeah, yeah. If you're just wanting to work, to have healthy food, you don't have to have a whole homestead. You can do some in-ground, garden beds and that kind of stuff. But if you are looking to do a homestead, you need to make sure that you plan it out. I mean, sit down at the table and, plan out how much land you're willing to purchase and how much you think that you'll really use. I mean, you don't really need 40 acres if you're just having a garden and some chickens.
Right.
And even a few cows, you don't need 40 acres. You maybe need, 5 or 6.
And if you're not getting livestock, you could, as long as they're not in the HOA, you could probably, or any city regulations, you got to check that out too first.
Yeah,
But
you can have chickens as long as you're not in
Yeah.
a HOA, that prohibits them in the city. If you've got, even just, you don't even have to have an acre. You can have half an acre and have a few
Yeah.
chickens and a small garden. So, if you're looking to homestead, just make sure that you plan it out. Sit down, and you need to plan what you're going to do for those years. The first year, don't try to accommodate, like every animal that you can get in the first year. The first thing that we started off with was the chickens, and we'd love to have other animals, and we may do that in the future. One thing you might could think about is having maybe some land with a pond.
You do want a water source of some
Yes,
sort,
yes.
whether it be a creek or a pond coming through it. It's just usually I mean, it may not be possible all the time, but you do.
Yeah. The pond, you can stock it with fish. We enjoy eating fish, and a lot of people do. Stock it with fish, or even as a water source for your garden. To have a pond on the land would be wonderful.
Right, but just you want to know your goals, your 5-year goal, about before you buy your land. Now, you may not can go out and purchase you may have to do it in steps. You may have to live in one place for a little bit and then sell that and move somewhere else. But, it before you buy land and commit, you do want to have a goal in mind, and you would want to make sure you're committed to this because, it is a lot of work, but I'm going to tell you, it is very rewarding. It's especially if you have young children. Our children were practically grown when we moved out here. Our daughter was in high school, but it's just something about living out in the country on a homestead, and teaching kids to grow their own food, and instead of going to fast food all the time, and getting every single thing from the grocery store, but just to teach them where the food comes from. It's just something about that. And, for them to be able to go out and pet chickens and see where the eggs come from. It's just something about that.
Yeah, it's special. So, once you purchase your land, once you do that, the first steps that you need to do is you run your water and stuff. And like I said, if you have a pond, that's great because you can water your stock. You can water your chickens from there, your garden if you needed to. So, just, know that you've got to have water, especially if you're planning on, even in the future, having, cows down the road. You've got to be able to have.
If you're going to have livestock anywhere down the road, you're going to need water on that property.
Yeah. So just think about that. And one thing is, if you're putting up fences and you're going to have livestock, just remember to do that right the first time. Don't, make sure you set your post and you do that, the right way, because in the future, that fence can come down if you don't do it the right way. And that's one of the mistakes that people make if they're going to have livestock, is not putting up the fence right.
Yeah, and also you'll want to put that fence up right and build, your infrastructure right the best you can. You don't want to go overboard and waste money, but especially most people are going to be working a full-time job also, so you don't want to have to leave work, come home, and tend to whatever. So you want to make sure you think it out. You put the infrastructure in right. But again, try your best just to take it easy. Do one little thing one year and one little thing the next year.
And if you're going to have a garden, make sure you know that you've got to have, the materials for that garden, like some compost and stuff like that. At first, you need, the necessary tools. You do need a plow of some sort. If you're going to have a garden, it's kind of hard. Or you can do raised beds. A lot of people do the raised beds.
I think if I were just starting, and we're going to try, if we have time, we're going to do raised beds this year. We have the old-fashioned teal garden, and we do have tractors that we can go out and disc it up, and then I do plow it with a push plow tiller, but you really don't have to have all that. If you've got some good soil, you can put it in a raised bed,
and grow
you can
anything.
And I think it's more efficient to do it in a raised bed, and it's just it seems a lot easier. So that may be something to consider, especially if you don't have a lot of land at first. Even if you do have a lot of land, a lot of people are going to the raised bed part because it's just
It's just
a lot
easier.
a lot easier on your back too.
Right. You may want to think about growing some fruit trees, and fruit trees do, take time to grow. So if you, just really love apples or, peaches, get you a few apple trees, a few peach trees, and plant those. But you'd want to do that on your first year. By year 5, you should be
Right.
be producing some apples and some
I think
peaches.
I wish we would have planted more fruit trees at first. We've
Yeah.
planted a few, some of them died, and the apple tree, I think it died this year right after its first apples. So
Yeah, yeah. So
but if you're going to be at a place you're going to settle down in, try to plant some trees if you can. You want to plant it out so where the trees are located where you're wanting to be, but that's that's one of the first things I think I would do is do the trees.
Yeah.
And then do your garden, plan your garden out.
Right. And make sure you do it right, again, the first time, because if you don't do it right, you will have consequences. We didn't really do our chicken pen right.
Yeah.
We got a prefabricated chicken pen, and it kind of, just went south towards the end there after we've had it for about 4 years. So just plan accordingly, do your research about that kind of stuff. You want to, if you invest the money up front, to something good, then it lasts in the long run and you don't have to replace it and spend money later. Now, one of the things is a lot of people, they're gung-ho and they go in there, but they get some burnout. You don't want to burn out on what you're doing. So just make sure that whatever you're doing, that you're really for this, and don't get burnt out on it. Don't,
And that's why you should take it slow. Don't think you got to do everything in that first year, because things on a homestead happen in a season, and you'll get used to that. But don't think you have to have a garden that first year big enough to support your whole family.
Right.
Or, start small. Maybe get just a few chickens and just a small garden
or a small raised bed,
and do it a little at a time. And then by the next year, you'll kind of know what to expect, and then you could probably, go a little bigger. But especially if you're working a full-time job, it's real easy to get burned out because you're probably tired of there. And it's I don't think we're built like our ancestors were.
I don't think we are either.
Your grandparents and my grandparents, they had full-time jobs
and a garden,
and not only a garden, they had a garden that they hardly ever went to the store.
Right, right.
I mean, there was a garden that was huge.
Yes, and
for some reason, it's harder for us now these days to do that.
And I guess it's because we're so dependent on our technology. I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what causes that, but I do think that's probably the issue. But yeah, I grew up. We had every kind of vegetable that you could imagine, especially in the summertime, on the table. We didn't go, buy a bunch of vegetables in cans from the grocery store. We did have a garden, and we ate out of the garden, like wonderful things. There was tomatoes and corn, and even we grew peanuts when I was young.
Did you?
Yes, we did. We grew peanuts, and my grandfather would, pull those up out of the ground, and he'd boil them and make us some boiled peanuts and roast them. They were good.
Yeah. And by the way, if you've got anything to add, let us know in the comments below. We want to thank you for watching. And if you're watching on the replay, let us know.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I'll bring up the comments just in case here. But yeah, it was, I remember, we grew up I grew up in the city, but my grandparents had garden, and it was the best food ever.
Yeah, it just tasted good.
Yeah,
and it does now. If we get vegetables out of the garden, it's just the taste of it. It tastes better than anything you can buy in the grocery store.
Which I love to grow tomatoes. I don't eat them, but our family they've gotten to where they will not eat a tomato from the grocery store because
Yeah.
they love the
Homegrown ones.
taste of the homegrown ones. So
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, the point is try to start small, and especially if it's your first year, to just kind of get used to it. And
Mm-hmm.
you this is something you've worked for. You don't want to get burnt out on it. If this is something that you've dreamed about.
Right.
And another thing is to if you're looking at buying land and you're not sure what state to get in, um, do a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
Because some places have a lot of restrictions. Luckily, our place does not have a lot of restrictions, but there are some that may restrict you being able to
Buildings.
live in
Yeah.
a tiny house or
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. I've seen some people in other states have problems that they get a tiny house and they're not allowed to live in it because it's because of
Right.
the strict restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you check your the state regulations, check
County.
the county regulations,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's in the city, check those regulations before you even think about buying any land, because I think that's one of the most important things when you're
Yeah.
I'm not trying to scare anybody off, but just do the best you can as far as research on that, because that could be a bad mistake, and you don't want to get a lot of land and not be able to use it the way you wanted to.
Exactly. So, wherever you're building your homestead or wherever you're going, try to meet some, your neighbors. I just know, even if you're, living in the city, it's nice to know your neighbors. But out in the country where we live, the neighbors for us would be willing to help no matter what, if they needed, if you needed a hand or whatever. Out in the country, a lot of times your neighbors are willing to help you. So,
Yeah.
make
And
friends with your neighbors.
let me make a suggestion on how she grew up here, then we moved away, and when we moved back, all the people that we knew before, they either passed away or moved
Right,
away.
right.
And this, we've got a neighbor just close to us, but other than that, it's a mile down the road.
Right.
That's how close the neighbors are here. But we didn't really know any of the new neighbors when we moved
We
back. So
didn't.
I think one of the big suggestion is get involved in a church. One of the little churches. If you're
Yeah.
not already, don't leave your church if you've already got
Yeah.
one. But get involved with the local church, and that's a good way to meet people, because we did.
Yeah.
We moved from the church in the city to a little country church, and we got to know the neighbors. They're great people. They'll help you, and you can help them. But that's a good way to get in the community.
Yeah.
To get involved with that local. And I think now we know just about everybody around.
We do.
And
We
it's
do.
and not only that, they a lot of them raise chickens, and they're country people just like we are now. So that's one way to get to know some people.
So, yeah. So, I hope y'all, will let us know in the comments below if, you have any ideas, or if you're living on a homestead. We'd love to know about that and how you started your homestead.
Yeah, or if you're looking for a home, if you're thinking about starting a homestead, let us know in the comments, and would like to hear from you. Another thing to think about, we've touched on this a little bit, but like, what animals are you going to get? Have that long-term plan, but are you going to get pigs, you're going to get
Cows.
chickens.
Yeah.
And then, not only are you going to get chickens, but are you going to get chickens to lay eggs, or are you going to get chickens for meat birds? Because there is a big difference.
Yeah.
And a different way to raise them too.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things we're thinking about
Is
when
getting
the
some
time
meat.
is right.
Yeah,
We
to
wanna
get some meat birds.
Right. We want to get some meat birds. And then if you get meat birds, you've got to have a place to put them.
Whenever you're doing the harvesting of the chickens, you
Yeah.
have to have somewhere to do that and the necessary tools to do it. Now, I know a lot of homesteaders that are in our community, it's a community effort and they get together and they'll, do that together. And there's probably, in a lot of areas, there's a homestead community that you can join and be a part of that. So look into that too. In some of the small towns, they have farmers markets, so
Yeah.
go to those, meet with other people, that are like minded. And you might could, exchange information, exchange eggs, exchange animals if you needed to. So that's one thing that you might could do.
And when you're thinking about those animals, unless you've got experience in it, I don't think I would suggest just straight going and getting a flock of, a herd of cattle. That's definitely something that you need to get with,
Somebody to
yeah,
give you some
somebody and get
education.
some information on that. But my opinion is chickens are probably the easiest thing to raise.
They are.
Just get a few of those and start out with, and when you're choosing what animals to get, you've got to make sure you budget for it too. Because they're going to cost. And probably the bigger the animal, the bigger the cost. But
Yeah.
Even chickens, you have to buy the feed. You've got to get the bedding. I think we've got a video on the channel how much it costs to raise chickens. So you need to do a little research on that. And they're not real expensive, but they do add up. If
They're
things are-
really not. Mine are because I have 30. But if you only have 6 chickens, they're really not that expensive to keep them. Even mine, I have to buy the bags of food or maybe $15 a piece, and I think I have to buy 2 bags a month. If I'm buying the pellets, the layer pellets and stuff for them. So it's really not that bad. As far as food, especially if you're in a place to let them free range, they can free range and kind of help supplement their diet that way.
Yeah. So again, some of the big mistakes to avoid is, getting the wrong animals on the farm. As she said earlier, if you put that fence up, do it right. If you're building the chicken coop, make sure you do that right.
And don't plant too close to trees. If you're having your garden,
Yeah.
you don't want it, most vegetables don't do well in a shady area. I think there's some like maybe strawberries that do better in a shady area, but just be aware that if you're building your garden or your raised beds, that most of your stuff is going to need a good amount of sunlight to grow correctly. Or even if you're building your barn or wherever you're going to keep your chickens, make sure there's not a lot of trees because they can fall,
Yeah.
and ruin where you're building. So,
Yeah. And then you want to make sure the soil is okay too. You might, if it's the first year, you might want to have some hauled in if there's not any good soil on your property. But and one of the biggest mistakes people make, we kind of touched on this earlier, is where you get your land. Probably make sure it's not in a HOA,
right.
because
They have rules.
they got a lot of rules.
So, and even if you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have an HOA, if you have a rooster, people are going to complain if you, so.
Well, that's true. If you decide to get chickens and if you don't want fertile eggs, it's
fine.
If you're living close to somebody, you probably want to just not have a rooster.
Yeah.
That way it's, not as, your neighbors are not going to hopefully complain as much.
Right.
So,
Now, some HOAs will let you have a garden and that kind of stuff, or, just chickens, but just be aware of that. And also when you're doing a project, make sure you finish it. You don't want.
you're talking about me right now.
Yeah, I am.
I don't think I've done a project yet that is finished.
Yeah, we still got to work on our chicken pen.
Yeah, I got to finish the shop.
It's hard.
Let's skip that one.
Okay.
Try your best to finish, because I'm really bad about that.
Yeah.
I'm probably the worst one here about that. That I'll start something, get it just good enough to use, then move on to something else, and it'll be less pressure if you actually finish what you started. So you know, but yeah, you do want to try to do that. But again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are trying to do this live stream for homesteaders or for people that's looking to homestead or to kind of develop a community here so we can ask each other questions and talk about it. We're trying to do it weeknights at 7:30 Central. And if you've got any topics that you want discussed or any questions, let us know in the chat on the replay. We do read every one of the chats. So, please let us know.
Yep.
So thanks again, and hope you'll hit the like button and subscribe, and hope to see you tomorrow night.